All right, this session is a initial overview of the Trustmade Growth ecosystem. This session is specifically around identifying the 6 factors that contribute to Trustmade Growth. So we're going to hit them at a high level, and then at the end, you should be able to understand at a basic level kind of how the 6 factors work, why they are what they are, and how to perhaps recognize them in the ventures that you work in. The Trustmade Growth system is really to answer the basic question of what makes trust in ventures and what about that is catalytic for actually producing organic growth. And by organic growth, we mean all forms of it: health, vitality, usefulness, value, and then obviously scale type growth as well. So trust, we fundamentally believe, is the core factor to all of that. And trust is actually much more difficult to do than is sort of commonly understood in the business ecosystem. So, which is why we've done the work to bring it back to the surface. So we actually work on Trustmade Growth through 2 different matrices. One is the leader matrix and one is the venture matrix. Just want to address that both of those exist. They are interrelated. We aren't going to talk at all about the leader matrix on this call. That's a different recording, but I wanted to really let you know that that does exist and that we're going to be zooming in on the venture matrix here on the left. And what you're going to see there in the matrix is 6 factors. These are the factors that in an interrelated way, and they all affect each other, create, stimulate, and are the fuel, the engine, the ecosystem by which growth is fueled by trust in a venture. And so we're going to work from 12 o'clock on the clock and work around culture, value creation, positioning, community, point of view, and org design. One of the first things that you're going to notice about the 6 of these factors is that they're all fairly familiar things. We're not trying to category create here. We're not trying to invent new ideas that have never been said before. The reason why Trustmade Growth was built over a period of years is to organize commonly understood ideas in a format that can actually evaluate and look under the hood of a venture and then actually produce transformational change in meaningful sprints of work so that trust can be deeper embedded in the organization and produce more effective organic growth. So we're not trying to do anything new here. And trust is not new. Trust is a neurological factor that happens way back at the base of the brain of any buyer in any situation, of any really human in any situation, but of course in a buying and selling situation. And so the 6 factors aren't new. They are distinctly organized, and that's what makes this important in terms of how they're set up to relate to each other and the way those interrelations make a difference in the kind of final analysis of how you look at a venture. So let's look at, before we jump into the 6, let's talk about how we evaluate each one. So each of the factors is seen through a lens of basically eras of growth. So each factor, so each of those 6 things that we just saw moves through 5 different stages of trust and often back and forth. It is not necessarily a linear process. One of the first things to be really clear to understand is that these stages are not good or bad. They can be good or bad depending on what season the venture is in, and that's where we get to safety lane, which we'll talk about here in a second. But each stage is meaningful and valuable in its own way. So the first stage, of course, is underdeveloped. Like, we just haven't thought about this. It's not been an important issue. We haven't put the energy behind it. Underdeveloped hits against a drive ceiling. So a factor for growth is going to stay underdeveloped until the venture, and in many ways the leader, discovers enough drive, enough inner human fire to go, we're going to make this better. We can talk about till we're blue in the face. We can create systems. We can bring in consultants. We can do whatever. None of that's going to be effective until we resolve the drive ceiling. Once we move through the drive ceiling, a factor can then move into an entrepreneurial stage. And I think we all can imagine what an entrepreneurial stage is like, right? A little bit chaotic, lots of ideas, things are constantly being reinvented, nothing's ever approved, right? We say we're going to do it this way, and then we tweak it, and then we do something else. We're trying a lot of things, a lot of failing forward, hopefully, is truthful of entrepreneurial seasons. And entrepreneurial seasons are critical for organizations to become differentiated. If you don't get an entrepreneurial season, if you don't have a season of time that you're building and breaking and building and breaking, you're almost always going to be a carbon copy of something else, which is going to push you firmly into the commodity space. And being pushed firmly in the commodity space is a very difficult way to compete, if you can honestly compete at all in the current way the economy is structured. Every entrepreneurial stage for every factor butts up against the founder ceiling. Only the founder can release the organization from its entrepreneurial stage in any factor. Now, of course, the founder could be released by a board or something like that, but in most cases that doesn't happen. The founder has to be ready to look themselves in the mirror and say, I have to become a different kind of a leader in this area, in this factor. Obviously, they may not have that language, but fundamentally, I have to become a different leader in this factor. And that then moves them into a stage where that factor, the culture, the value creation, the community, the POV, which we'll talk about here in just a second, these things manifest in health-forward ways in the organization on their own without you having to be in the room with the founder. Prior to that, the engine for everything is the founder, that he or she is the driver, the pusher, the thing that makes things happen in every factor. Once you move through that, once the organization agrees to move through that with the impetus of the founder, has to be one of the main agreeers, then we move into an implicit stage where things can become, oh, that's just how things are done around here. The implicit stage is really, really powerful because you start to move things from intentional work to passive work. Some good things, some healthful things in the organizations are now just being done as a matter of rote. Right? They're just part of the culture, or they're just part of the operations, or they're just part of the way we always talk around here, or whatever it may be, of the venture's trustworthiness is embedded in the organization. And that embeddedness allows you to focus on other things and allows you to get more specific and allows you to grow in ways that are less laborious. That's the beauty of the implicit stage. The challenge of the implicit stage is as things become automatic, or that's just how things are done around here, we can already hear the other side of that double-edged sword. How things are done around here becomes a weapon by which we resist change. And things get tired and they get old, and we need to break the way things have always been done around here. And the biggest way we recognize that is there's a gap between the way things are done and the way things are perceived on the inside, on one of the 6 factors of trust, and how it's needed on the outside. So the gap between the internal sense of this is who we are and the external clarity of this is who we are widens over time, because the internal world gets swampy. It gets culty, it gets Kool-Aid-y, it gets, oh, we're just this way, people don't understand us. And you start solving things with extensive campaigns or money or salesmanship, or things to bridge that ever-widening gap between what's happening on the inside and what's happening on the outside. Well, the tool to align the good things on the inside and the perception of the outside, the master tool for that is brand. But for brand to work, we have to silence the echo and say, how do we be a certain way on the inside that's true to who we are, that also is meaningful to the outside? And how do those things become mirror images of each other? That is where brand starts to do a lot of work, because brand is always two-sided. We're not talking about branding, colors and fonts and logos. We're talking about brand, which is credibility in action. Credibility in action is the essential feature of what brand does, and it moves alignment between the outside and the inside. And when that's done well, we move into a brand-led stage. Now, for anybody who's worked in brand before, you know that trying to enforce brand on an organization that's in an entrepreneurial era is almost impossible. So brand is a beautiful thing at the right time, in the right way, when it's used smartly by people who know how to leverage it. But often it can be a hammer where everything's a nail, and we're trying to enforce complex brand-led ideas in culture or value or POV or positioning. We're trying to enforce some sort of global brand ideal against an organization that's not ready for it. So brand is a great example of when situations happen where we are trying to be in a stage that looks like it's better because it's higher on the chart, but it's not really better because it's not what the organization's ready for. And then the last stage is enterprise grade, which is basically where we take all this and we turn it into systems. We turn it into franchise books and SOPs and repeatable machinery, sometimes literal machinery, that mass produces it without a lot of thought. So you can see as we move up the list, we're taking more things from the intentional, we're doing it on purpose, into the systemic, which is we're doing it automatically. And that's how organizations grow, is they have to think about fewer and fewer things. It's also how organizations implode, because they get calcified and they forget to check all those systems and go, Do we need to fix this? Do we need to change this? Do we need to fix this? Which is an example of when it's healthy to go backward. Sometimes some factor, let's say culture or let's say org design, gets too calcified, it's too systematized, it's too over-designed, it's too rote processes, and we need to look at it and go, hey, who are we? Is this still true of who we are? Who does the public need us to be? Who do our clients need us to be? And those are brand questions. So then we take an enterprise system and we bring it back down into the brand-led stage so that it can get reevaluated. So every factor is moving up and down across these 6 stages. So now we're going to look at each one. We're going to look at the 6 factors. Quickly before we do that, you've probably caught on, as I've been referencing as ago, is the issue of safety lane. Every organization, every venture, by way of its age, leadership, its size, and its speed of change, has a safety lane. So age, leadership, size, and speed of change has a safety lane. That safety lane is kind of where you want all the factors to be. Like if they're in the safety lane, then we can kind of run in a coherent way. That doesn't tend to be how things go. They tend to be all over the place. But when things are in the safety lane, organizationally, it feels like we're on the balls of our feet and we can move forward for every organization. So safety lane moves up and down depending on where the organization is, where the venture is. All right, so we're going to look at each of the factors, the 2 structural factors, which are kind of up here in the left and up in the down in the right-hand corner. The first is org design. So org design is the internal structure of a business. The mantra of org design is that all ventures run on power. Org design is how we allocate authority, responsibility, and accountability. And it is the system of agreements between the roles and departments that define the venture's outcomes. It's the structure by which we do the work. Sometimes that's implicit, sometimes that's explicit, but it's really fundamentally all about how power is organized. And the reason why this is so important is because we've all been in situations where we've got a great campaign or we have a great sales process or we have a new product launching and all of it implodes because the power's bubbled up, there's political issues, there's confusion as to who's responsible. The best ideas come gritting to a halt because the org design can't support the kind of work that's trying to be done, and it's trust breaking. So that internal structure matters, particularly when we think about the relationship of marketing, sales, and product. It can happen in other areas, but one of the big areas that we always have to look at in a structural factor is the relationship between marketing, sales, and product. Positioning is the external structure. It's where we put the fences of an organization. So an organization says, we belong here in this space. We're going to challenge these areas and serve in these areas. We've got other people across the fence line that are similar to us or that other people might go visit on their way here. They're either partners or competitors. We comfortably live in a space where there are other people on other sides of the fence, and we're not trying to be all things to all people. That's positioning. Positioning is literally what it is baked into the name. You know where to find us, and where you stand determines who you are. Positioning tells us what the product should be. Positioning tells us a little bit about org design. Positioning tells us a little bit about what our POV should be. All of these things have information that they're impacting each other along the way. So that's positioning. The next 2, we move into the relational factors. Culture is, of course, the internal relationships of a venture, and what we do makes us. Now, what we do here in this sense is not meant by the product we make, but what we do, how we interact, the rhythms, the customs, the vocabulary, the word choices, the acronyms. All of those cultural factors, the implicit way of being is the way we often say it. Those implicit ways of being are determinative of how trustworthy an organization is. And you cannot import culture from the top. Culture is made by all the relationships souping together into a petri dish where something happens and a culture is made, right? And so to fix culture is a relationship game. It's not a power game. Power happens in org design. It is a culture game. It is a relationship game. Now, org design has an impact on that, which is why they're right next to each other on the design. But you cannot grow consistently. You cannot build credibility on a crappy culture unless you're going to buy your way out. And even then, eventually it will catch up with you. Because you also have to have clarity on your external relationships, which a venture's external relationships is its community. Who is the substance of how? And by community, we mean all the relationships that define what a venture exists to do, right? So that is obviously their clients or customers. It's also the shareholder base. It's also the employees. It's also the prospective customers. Prospective customers and customers are two different pools. Those are often very different groups of people. And it's the partnership ecosystem. It's the supply chain. It's all of those communities together in tandem. The taproot of that root system of relationships is the prospective customer. Everything is driven by the emotional decision engine, how the deciding factors impact the prospective customer. That is more definitive of what an organization grows into than even the slightly less important existing customer, because the existing customer is often reacting to a venture that existed 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So the core community, what we call the MVC, the most valuable community, is the prospective customer and their psychographic profile, which is a different video, different training for a different time, which we'll talk about on other trainings. And then lastly, that gets us to the beneficial factors, which is the world of value. So value is all about both value creation, how we deliver value and how we deliver product and design the offering. And then that's the internal value creation. And the external value creation is how we format that into point of view. What we say, how we say it, how we describe ourselves. An organization is not trustworthy without a coherent public point of view. Seeing is believing. They have to see how you think, what you do, what your impressions are, how you differentiate from your voice from the voice in the field. In today's economic system, you can't win by advertising except at enormous scales. You have to win by being a distinct voice, having a clear religion, what you believe, a clear wisdom, what you know that nobody else knows, and a clear praxis, what you'll do that nobody else will do, that differentiates that point of view in the public sphere. All of that is then reflected in a defined offering that is a coherent and trustworthy. And that offering design really is about CX. It's about how they onboard. It's obviously about the offering itself. It's all of those things intertwined. So that's our quick summary of the 6 factors and the trust layers that they go through, the trust stages that they go through. We'll go through each one individually in further trainings and further videos.